Again, we're in History of Christianity by Kenneth Scott Latourette, page 361, dealing with the turn of the 9th century, the era of Charlemagne, and now we're dealing with Gottschalk and several other monks who are involved in controversy, theological controversy at this point, in the United Church. Gottschalk was the center of another controversy, that over predestination. As a child, the son of a Saxon count, he had been dedicated to the monastic life in Fulda. When he reached adolescence, he sought and obtained release on the ground that this had not been with his assent, yet he did not return to the secular life, and although he left Fulda, was ordained to the priesthood and became one of the numerous itinerant monks of the time. He was a diligent student of the writings of Augustine, and attempting to support his position by quotations from that saint, held that, for reasons which we cannot fathom, God predestined some to eternal life, and that those so predestined cannot fail of that life, while, on the other hand, and here was the chief point of debate, those who are not predestined to eternal life are predestined to eternal death. Obviously, this was contrary to the official view, which had been set forth in 529 at the Council of Orange. It will be recalled that the Orange Gathering, while affirming original sin, declaring that turning to God is wholly through God's grace, and anathematizing those who declare that our will can anticipate God's action, also condemned the teaching that some are predestined to evil, and said that if they labor faithfully, all the baptized can perform those things which are necessary to salvation. Powerful opposition was ranged against Gottschalk. In it were the abbot of his old monastery, which is Raban Maur, and the aggressive and skillful controversialist Hincmar, Archbishop of Reims, or Reims, R-H-E-I-M-S. They were willing to say that God foreknows the sin of those who are not elected to salvation, but they denied that he foreordains it. In 848, Raban Maur, now Archbishop of Mainz, M-A-I-N-Z, had Gottschalk expelled from the realms of Louis the German. That action threw the unfortunate monk into the province of Hincmar, and in 849 the latter caused him to be deposed from the priesthood and imprisoned in a monastery. This did not end the controversy. Gottschalk had powerful friends who rose to his defense. They came out vigorously against Hincmar, and some councils took their side. However, in a council in 860, in which most of the Frankish domains were represented, it was Hincmar who triumphed, with slight verbal concessions to his opponents. An attempt was made to take the case to Rome, but a few years later the unfortunate Gottschalk died in his monastic prison, unreconciled to the church. More radical than Gottschalk, but in another way, was Claudius, Bishop of Turin, who flourished under Louis the Pious. Said to have been a pupil of Felix of Urgel, he was an earnest student of Augustine. He vigorously denounced the reverence of images and the cross. In this he was in agreement with the general convictions in the Frankish Church. However, he also came out against the current practice of asking for the intercession of the saints. Even more striking was his attitude towards the papacy. He was critical of the Pope, declaring that he is not to be called apostolic, who sits in the seat of the apostle, but he who does the work of an apostle. The most eminent intellectual figure of the reign of Charles the Bald, John Scotus Eriugena, also called Johannes Scotus, was drawn into the controversies over the Eucharist and predestination. An Irish scholar, he was familiar with the great Greek theologians and translated the works of some of them into Latin, including especially Dionysius the Areopagite. In his intellectual position, he was more of a Neoplatonist than a Christian, but in words and perhaps sincerely, he subscribed to the Christian faith. Some questioned his orthodoxy, but he was protected by the friendship of Charles the Bald and by his superior scholarship, equipped as he was with a knowledge of the Greek as well as the Latin writings to which the Church looked as authoritative. His was a powerful and philosophically subtle mind, and in the disputes of the day he undercut both parties. For instance, in the issue of predestination and foreknowledge, he declared that from God's standpoint there is neither past nor future, for since he is eternal, he sees all of us and at once. He declared the disjunction between foreknowledge and foreordination to be false, because God can know only what he does. He also held that evil has no real being. Eriugena was too formidable to be tried for heresy by his Frankish contemporaries, but in 855 and 859 his views were condemned by synods. Next time, developments in church discipline as well as declining Carolingian and growing papal power. I'll put in a link to James Orr, the whole playlist really that we put together of James Orr's writings on basic theology. In this particular video, I'm going to add to the playlist on your screen. Orr is discussing the omnis, including, of course, God's omniscience, his knowing all. This was the essence of the debate back then, but James Orr is writing, of course, around 1900, with the benefit of 12 or 13 centuries of controversy and consensus on these very subjects. See you next time.